please help me to welcome Upasna Gautam, who is a product manager at the digital news platform and services team at CNN. Upasna has been working in the tech industry for the last 15 years, where she has been an integral part of delivering technical data-informed solutions for brands such as Ford Motor Company, PC Mag, Mashable, Mars Corporation, and Kimberly-Clark. Upasna has been a public keynote speaker for the last decade and is a regular speaker at conferences like South by Southwest, Inbound, Grace Hopper Celebration, and the Digital Summit Series, and TEDx. Outside of her day job at CNN, she is an avid public speaker, writer, tech career coach, meditation teacher, a community lead with Google's Women Tech Makers, and a product management mentor with the News Product Alliance. In 2020, she was awarded a top product coach honor by Reforge Products by Women and Scale Higher. Upasna publishes a monthly LinkedIn newsletter about mindful productivity and leadership called Working from Home. I will send you all a follow-up email with the link so that you can subscribe to her newsletter. So if you would all please join me in welcoming Upasna. Thank you.
I really need to take out like all of my 10, 15 year. I'm really aging myself with that information. I need to take out.
Oh, no, it's impressive. Like I was like, whoa, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming and speaking with us here at Women Talk Design. And I'd love to just get right to it and start to talk about, let's just start with, how did you even start to do public speaking? You've been doing it for the past decade now. And so I'd love to know, how did you get started?
Yes. Thank you all for being here. Also, I'm super excited about this conversation as opposed to me talking at people for an hour. So thank you all for having me and for being here. As Frances said, I started about a decade ago. And it's interesting because it didn't really start from a positive experience. It stemmed from some crappy experiences that turned into really good experiences. So not to be so cryptic, we'll get into more details here, but basically when I first started working in tech, I had some mentors and bosses at the time who told me that public speaking is a great way to build your professional brand and also, solidify and strengthen skills in the workplace. And so I was very interested in, figuring out how to go down that path. And so the problem was at that time when I, expressed my interest in learning more and like, how do I pitch, or could you review this proposal for me, or could you recommend me for this conference I'm interested in? I got shut down by those same people over and over and over again. And shut down or ignored, sometimes gaslit about things in the process. And it wasn't until later on, a few years later, where I had new bosses and mentors that actually became my sponsors and advocated for me. And the really crappy part about all of this, and it took me a long time to really understand what was going on here, was that the initial experience in the beginning of my career, where I was kind of ghosted and ignored or gaslit with those experiences, happened to be with leaders who were women, and the ones who gave me the chance and the opportunity later on were actually men. And again, I didn't realize this until much later in my career that, what had happened there. And when I did, I was like, okay, I need to make a vow to myself to never be that woman, in my career, especially as I become a leader. So going back to those experiences, when I expressed my interest and that I wanted to go down this path of public speaking. I think having a sponsor was really the critical part here. Not having just a mentor that can show you the ropes, but really having someone as a sponsor who can say your name and recommend you and tell you, here's the way, this is the way in, and I'll recommend you for this, or I'm going to connect you with this person who is the conference organizer. And that's what they did for me. It started with very, very small meetups. My very first speaking engagement was a little meetup. I used to live in Dallas, and it was a little tech meetup that I was invited to speak at because my boss recommended me to the organizer because he knew him, as a way to like get my feet wet and public speak. And it was a group of 50 people. I was terrified and excited. And that one event and that one speaking engagement bolstered everything else after that. It felt like everything after that came trickling in one by one by one, because it's kind of like a domino effect. If you get to know the people, you do a good job, they recommend you to others. And also at that point, I had a great network at work that was recommending me for different events as well.
Awesome. I have a follow-up question. You mentioned in the beginning of your answer that you were rejected by so many people, and I understand that. I myself, I'm an actor on the side, and rejection is like breathing. We get it quite often. And so how did you keep yourself motivated to keep going and to keep trying?
I was very defeated at first, like that couple of years where those really bad experiences left a really bad taste in my mouth. And I pretty much closed the door on the entire thing until I went and started a new job. And I had my boss at that time, who is still my friend and mentor to this day, was the one that really like opened up the door and became a sponsor for me and told me that, your voice is powerful and needs to be heard. And like, you have it in you to do this. And he didn't know of any of the context and history of what had happened before I got there. And so the fact that he was able to still see that in me from nothing really motivated me to try again. And so I did.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know it's always so hard, and there's always those moments in time where you can feel defeated, and it takes like that one person to see and to hear and know like, hey, you have something to say and it's important, people need to hear it. And that's awesome that you found that. So you do all of this speaking, and then you're currently speaking as well. I'd love to know, what are the topics that you're most interested right now? Like, what's the thing that you're either working on to start speaking about, or you're just passionate about at this moment?
It's so interesting how much it's changed. I started talking mostly about technical topics, like very much related to the problems I was solving at work, very rooted in technical architecture of things I was delivering and strategy. And so it was very much discipline related, and like that subject matter related on what I was working on. Whereas now I talk a lot about leadership, public speaking, and communication, because I realized that like those soft, like hard skills and technical skills are much easier to pick up and learn. And it's really the essential, I stopped calling them soft skills. I call them essential skills that are much more difficult to pick up, because you can't just read a book and learn how to be a great public speaker. You can't pick up a book and learn how to be a great communicator or a great leader. And so I talk more about that now, and especially because I never saw women like me, or of different colors, shapes, and sizes talk about these things when I was growing up. And when I was in the public speaking circuit, the tech circuit 10 years ago was much worse than it is now. There was just like a tiny fraction of women speaking in those circuits. And the ones that were there were incredibly inspiring. And again, that it's kind of like this combination of the lack of the representation was of course there, and it's still there. And this is why I keep pushing to have those conversations and be in those places to have those and give those talks. But also I have found that there's like these two groups or two camps of presenter types and content that's delivered at conferences. And there's one group that is very much the inspirational, motivational speaker. I am not that. I very much prefer to focus on tactical guidance. That's like when you walk away from, investing an hour of your time with me, you have very tactical, actionable next steps that you can take. And usually the byproduct of that is that people are inspired, but that's never my primary goal. And so I realized that that was also sorely lacking in the content that was being delivered in presentations, where it's just, it's a lot of flowers and butterflies, which is nice to hear sometimes. But at the end of, again, people spending a lot of money to go to conferences or investing your time and energy, even in a place like this, right? I wanted to make sure that I'm always delivering tactical, actionable guidance. So it was a combination of those two things. And when I look at the topics I speak about now, where they are essential skills, and if there's a lot of ambiguity and subjectiveness around like leadership, communication skills, and public speaking, my goal is always to try to create and share frameworks or ways of thinking, so that when you walk away, you have a clear next step, no matter where you are on your path.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that. I love that you started out speaking about more technical things and then evolved as the years went on. I'd love to kind of rewind a little bit and hear a little bit more about your first speaking engagement. How did you get it? What was the experience like?
Yes. It is etched in my memory forever. It was a little meetup group. At that time, I mentioned earlier, I was living in Dallas. And this was when my boss recommended me to speak at this event because he knew the meetup organizer. And they were like, yeah, absolutely, let's have her come in. The topic I spoke on was search architecture, because I was working on building or re-architecting the way search and data is architected digitally at that time. I think I was working on Ford or Mars Corporation or something like that. And so I worked for a large advertising agency, so they were my clients. And so I was coming from that perspective. And so very, very, very dry, very black and white, very technical. And the meetup group was that audience, so it was a good fit. And so it was a lot more people than I expected. I thought it was going to be like 20, and it ended up being like 50. And it was in a classroom type of setting. And I was a nervous wreck. I don't really remember the actual presentation. It kind of went by in a blur, kind of blacked out a little bit during it. But at the end, I started to feel a lot better when people started asking questions. That's usually my favorite part of my presentation, is the end when people ask questions. And so that really, the types of questions people were asking me validated to me that okay, I didn't mess up. I know what I was talking about, and they want to know more. And to me, that is the sign of like a job well done.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, that is the sign. So as you have been developing these talks, and you've been a keynote speaker multiple times, how do you develop these talks? Like, how do you practice? Do you practice in front of people? How do you work through your process?
Again, changed a lot over the last few years, but there's one thing that has not changed at all. And if you've ever, if you follow me on social media, or you've been to any of my workshops on public speaking, like, I have shared this formula that I used over and over and over again, because it works every single time. And so no matter where I'm speaking, I always start with this kind of 3-part formula, which is creating a title, a summary / abstract, and then my actionable key takeaways. It's like my outline for my entire talk, but I also used to use that to pitch to different conferences. And so that proposal, those 3 elements of that proposal template is what I call it, are the 3 most common requirements that every single conference organizer wants, or that you'll see in a call for proposals or speakers. And so I started, after being rejected and accepted so much in my first 5-6 years of public speaking, I realized that these 3 elements are always there. And so I use that to frame every single one of my talks. And basically, you have your title is your title. Summary and abstract is kind of like your value proposition of your talk. And a lot of conference organizers use that piece to put in their agenda. And that's what the attendees see. So I'm always writing that with the attendees in mind. And then there are key takeaways. And this is a big, important piece that I think a lot of aspiring public speakers sometimes miss, and I used to miss a lot, is what are the tactical takeaways, the learning objectives that the attendee is going to walk away with. And it's like literally a bulleted list of the attendee will walk away with 1, 2, 3 after my session. And it's very, very specific, and specificity is really key in all of this, right? It's much better to pitch something or talk about something that you deep dive into rather than touch generically on several different subjects. And so that is like one framework and formula that I've used since day one, and I continue to use today. As far as practicing goes, it's very different depending on the type of conference and the type of event. I don't really in the beginning, it was a lot of practicing with peers, right? Like doing trial runs. But I also learned really quickly that stressed me out, and that didn't help me deliver my best presentations. And so I started to record myself, or I started to just do them alone, and speak out loud actually helped me the best. So I think you really got to figure out what works for you. I'm kind of like, I know when I'm ready for feedback and when I'm not. So I was asking for feedback too soon. I wasn't ready to receive it, because I really needed to just get it out and articulate what I wanted to present in a way, and refine it myself until it got to a point where I was ready to, have a peer review of some sort. Now I don't do that. I don't really, my practicing is more of like, I scan through my slides, make sure I have a firm understanding of the sequence. And I actually try not to over rehearse, because I don't want to sound robotic. And so I also, within that same vein, try to keep my slides very sparse with words, like bullet points, some key takeaways, more imagery. So even the way they look has transformed like dramatically. And I think that just happens with experience and as you build confidence and comfort.
Yeah, 100%. I love that you said you would record yourself and watch back, which I think is such a helpful tool, especially if, like, I know for myself, my family loves to keep me humble. So I don't enjoy necessarily sharing things in front of them, because they feel like that's their one and only aim, is to keep me humble. And so it's nice to have something where you can record it and actually like look back and see and kind of pick out those things, because when you hear it for yourself, a lot of times you catch those things that other people would have caught. So I think that's a great just a great thing for everyone to keep in mind as whether you're starting out speaking or even a seasoned speaker. It's a great practice. I'd love to talk. So you did mention that you said, maybe some people follow you on social media. You have a very strong social media presence, and I'd love to hear how you use that to leverage your career as a speaker.
It's so, after like not hearing about this for a while, I've had several people say this to me in the last couple of months, and I just think it's kind of funny because I have no strategy. I think of stuff on the fly and then I go and share it because I'm like inspired in the moment, or I think of something, or maybe I had a conversation with someone and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go prep this thing and just share it. So I have no strategy whatsoever. So if you guys are looking for like how to, I have no idea. I just throw everything out there and see what sticks. In the hopes that it will help someone. I will say that I'm glad that, you know, stuff like this is resonating more on social media. It makes me happy that there's platforms like out there, like, you know, I never in a million years when I joined Instagram when I was, you know, 22, like that, you know, that I would be sharing content like this. I was sharing pictures of, you know, my drink at the bar at that time. Like, it's God, please don't go scroll back on my Instagram. I don't know what's there. But so it really I only started to take it really seriously as far as like sharing more stuff around professional development during the pandemic. So it's only been a couple of years. One, out of boredom, two, out of like a way to pay it forward and give back in a really low effort, high impact way. I'm always about efficiency, and like that's a really easy way to just get out there and share things that you love or that you're passionate about. And I look at it all as these are mistakes I've made and things I've learned in my, you know, 20s and early 30s. And now as a late 30s year old, I'm like, these are things I wish that I had known at that time. That's really where all of it comes from. And I always feel really grateful and indebted to like a lot of those mentors and sponsors that I had at that point in my journey. And they would always tell me, like, you will pay it forward when the time comes too. And so, I mean, that's really it. It's not anything fancy or strategic, or I just kind of share the stuff that I think of in the moment and hope that it helps someone.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm going to ask another question. And while I'm asking that question, I'm just going to ask our audience to keep in mind the questions that you may have had pop up. We're going to open it up to questions after this one. So keep that in mind, and you can pop them in the chat or use the raised hand emoji. And my next question is about your TEDx. So a lot of people, a lot of speakers aspire to doing a TED Talk or a TEDx because that is the ultimate speaking engagement. What was that experience like, prepping for it, or even, you know, getting into it and everything? What was that experience like for you?
Yes, I will definitely get into. I realized I didn't answer the most important part of your last question, which was,
No worries.
how has social media maybe, you know, brought about different opportunities, which it absolutely has in ways I could have never imagined. And so I go into all of it, like I mentioned, with not, yes, to help others and share, but really like, how can I help other people solve problems? And that is really what a great public speaker does, is you help the attendee solve a problem that they are facing in their life. And I'm a product manager. That's what I do for my job anyways. And so like, I try to come into every presentation with that mindset of like, I'm here to help. How can I help you navigate a roadblock or solve a problem? Or is there an obstacle that, you know, we're all maybe facing or I've faced before? So the opportunities that have come from the type of content that I've shared are people just reaching out directly. And it's also caused a major shift for the better in the way that I approach speaking opportunities or take them and assess them as well. Because whereas before I was reaching out, the tables have definitely turned where I actually don't pitch anymore. And I have gotten an influx of requests because of that type of content being shared. I mean, that's why I'm here too. So yeah, I just wanted to share that. And then going into the TEDx part, TEDx is an interesting beast. I will say it's a great goal to have because it is so strict, and when there are confinements, you are forced to become really, really, really good. They don't play around with like, you know, like there's no leeway to mess up is what I'm saying. And that not to scare anyone, because anyone can do it, but it's just so, the process is so different from pitching anywhere else. I got into that TEDx because I was referred into the one that I spoke at by a friend who was closely connected to one of the organizers. I still went through part of the process, but it was definitely an expedited process because my friend had vouched for me. I had, you know, a pretty extensive resume of speaking experience, and they knew they kind of already knew what I was coming in with. So I did have to put together like a video proposal. That's kind of like the first, you know, kind of line of entry is like pitching your talk on video. And then from there, and there are other parts of it as well, like an actual application and all of that as well. The thing is with TEDx, they are all locally facilitated. So it does vary a little bit depending on locale, but the basics are, you know, an application and then a video. And sometimes they do interviews as well. And then from there, it is a very, very rigorous process. You have check-ins regularly. You cannot miss deadlines. Like you have to write out a full script, not just in addition to like the deck you want to use. You have to write out every single word that you're going to say, and have to have that approved by the committee. So yeah, it is a massive time and energy commitment for 15 minutes of fame. I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I did it back when I did. I'm never going to do it again. I don't care to spend time on that much time on that again. I think it's a great learning experience if you're really like if you want to be a better public speaker. Again, when there are constraints like that, it really forces you, and there's a lot of forcing functions for you to learn how to be a better public speaker. And of course, like the connections and the, you know, the brand authority that it and you know that it has, and integrity that it has always helps. You know, it's always, I mean, a great, you know, feather in the cap, right? Like there's no doubt about that. So highly recommend for certain reasons, highly do not recommend for certain reasons. It depends on what your goals are.
Okay, cool. I thank you for being so candid. That's like helpful, because I think I even had like in my mind, oh, to do a TEDx, ooh, but
Yeah.
hearing kind of the reality of like it's a little bit of a sink or swim situation is good to know. So we do have some questions from our audience. So I'll go with our first one. What do's and don'ts do you have for someone just starting with public speaking based on your experience?
Yeah, so the most important place to start, I mean, in order for public speaking and to be a public speaker, you need to get accepted to speak at conferences, right? Like that's the goal. In order to do that, you have to have strong, you have to have really compelling and strong proposals that you're pitching. And so this goes back to what I always preach like a broken record is have that 3-part proposal nailed down. If that is the first thing that the organizers are going to see and what they're going to base their decision off of, because a lot of times if you're pitching through a formal application process, or even if you're sending an email to an event organizer, like on a smaller scale, that proposal is what will get you in the door. It's not, you know, and again, those 3 parts are the title, and this title, keep it specific. You don't need to try to be clever and creative. You need to be specific and clear. When I read the title, I should know exactly what it is that you're delivering. So like, for example, there's, you know, my public speaking workshop, I've kind of changed. I used to call it how to break into the public speaking circuit as a woman in tech. This past year, when I redid it and delivered it again, I changed it to how to pitch winning speaking proposals. Like that's the name of it. And you want to just be able to get your point across really quickly and clearly in that title. So that's part 1. And then part 2 is the summary, which is 3 to 5 sentences. This is also known as an abstract. This is your talk's value proposition. This is, why are you the person to give this talk, and why is it an important topic to deliver, and what value are you delivering to the audience? That should be summarized there. And then we talked about the part that most people miss, and that I used to miss a lot too, was the key takeaways. Your 3 key takeaways is part 3, which is the tactical learning objectives. Think of them as action items that the audience will walk away with after they listen to your talk, and not the flowery stuff, like the tactical, like this is what you will be able to do after you listen to me for an hour. So those 3 parts, I mean, you have to start there. You can, think about like all of the different topics you want to do and create different proposals for them based on that formula. But as far as where to start is really nailing down that outline.
Awesome. Thank you. There is a little bit of a follow-up question to this one. How do you come up with content? And this person says, I feel the content I come up with, technical or non-technical, is already present online and doesn't add value.
There's only so many words in the English language, and there's only so many experiences. Like everything has already been repeated, but your version of it has never been repeated. Like I don't have anything inspirational really to say about that, except remove that thought from your mind. And if you are passionate about a topic and you have overcome an obstacle, or if there's a mistake you made that you learned from, share it. I mean, everything has already, I mean, you don't have to try to reinvent the wheel with public speaking. It is that you are in a place to deliver based off of your lived experiences, a talk that will probably help other people who may have been through the same thing. And I also say this like a broken record, is there's always someone who knows more than you, and there's always someone who knows less than you. You always have something to learn, and you always have something to teach. So you just got to find your audience. That's all. And so, yeah, the end.
Oh, that was really helpful. How do you research to narrow down what topic to present?
Also, I want to preface some of these answers with, I think sometimes topics and pursuing a path like public speaking, it's also why I talk about it so much, is overcomplicated. Talk about the stuff you're passionate about, because if that's the most important part. If you are doing it because you think people want to hear about it and not because you're actually interested in it, it's not going to work. I've been there, done that. And I'll never forget my first big conference I spoke at. I had one of my peers and friends in the audience who was there, and he was there to like cheer me on and give me feedback afterwards. And I was just happy to have like a familiar face in this very big room. And afterwards, after my presentation, I asked him, what'd you think? How'd it go? And he said, it was good. It was great. Like you know your stuff. There's no doubt about it. But where were you? And I'll never forget that, because he was like, I know you outside of this capacity, and you were not there. I didn't actually see Upasna there. I saw a smart girl talking about some stuff, but her personality was like, the personality I know that makes you who you are was not there. And that could have made it 100 times better. And I never forgot that. And so when it comes to those topics that you choose or want to talk about, just go with what makes you excited, what makes you, or what makes you curious more than anything. Like where are the places your mind goes when you're like, why is this the way it is? Why is this problem exist? How come no one has thought about solving this problem this way? Kind of let your emotions guide you to like the places where like, when do you get really pissed off? When do you get really frustrated at work? Think about those types of situations where, oh my God, this problem was so frustrating. Like, has no one thought of this answer or solution for it? Share that. That's what you share. Obviously in a more, politically correct and compelling way, but like, that's a great topic, right? And another one that always works is when you're able to be vulnerable and share a mistake you made and how you navigated that experience or how you overcame a roadblock, whether that's technical or non-technical, right? It could be something like literally a technical roadblock, or, dealing with a difficult coworker, or the difficulties of dealing with difficult remote workers or coworkers during remote working, right? Like, use your experiences, use those to drive what you want to talk about.
Mhm. Thank you. Yeah, that's so good. I love that, like, to talk about what you're passionate about rather than just like something you kind of know about.
Yeah.
So our next question is, I'm a firm believer in tackling what you fear and are hesitant about to build confidence. A few years ago, that was public speaking for me. What do you fear now or are hesitant about now that you are looking forward to tackling in the future?
From a public speaking perspective,
Mhm.
uh, I mean, there's not anything I really fear about public speaking. I would say there are, yeah, that's not really a realm of my professional like profile that I, think of like overcoming challenges and stuff like that. I think one goal that I have is to share more on this topic. And, again, like from the representation standpoint, this is a more like macro level issue, and goal is driving more, representation in places like tech conferences, and increasing the diversity of thought in those types of places where the conversations are happening, where hopefully by leading by example, if that I can do it, you can do it too. That's how I felt. That's what I needed. And I would love to see and have more and more of that. Especially, I've been working in the tech industry for a long time, and yes, there's been progress made when you go to tech conferences and see, there's more keynote speakers that are, it's a more diverse panel, but there's still a lot of work to be done. So I would say I don't really have any fears about public speaking, but that's what I want to tackle next. But that's a goal that I do have, is to continue to work towards leveling the playing field.
Our next question asks, how did you debug rejected proposals?
Couple ways. So always ask, right? Like if you get rejected, just reply and ask, do you have feedback? Sometimes you're going to get a response and sometimes you're not. So there's that. That's one part. It's just always seek and ask for the feedback of why you got rejected. Second thing is, you can pitch the exact same proposal at 10 different conferences and you're going to get some exceptions or some acceptances and some rejections. Use that as your feedback, right? What does it mean that you got rejected at, this conference, but you got accepted at 3 others? Sometimes there's nothing to analyze there at all, because there's so many parameters and variables that go into like the conferences and how their content programming works and their goals that they need to achieve. So I would look at the broader scope of like what you're pitching, where you're pitching, as opposed to one singular event, because that's not going to tell you much unless the person gives you direct feedback. I would say take that pitch, and if you got feedback, of course, apply it. But let's say you didn't. I would say at that point, maybe pitch it in a couple more places, and then also get feedback on your proposal from a seasoned public speaker or someone who can be a sounding board in that capacity.
Awesome, thank you. Our next question: to build a speaking portfolio, would you recommend presenting on the same topic to different audiences, or to show range on a diversity by presenting on adjacent topics?
Totally up to you. Depends on what your goals are. There are some people who talk about one topic and that's their thing and that's all they talk about and they're amazing at it. There's some people like me who talk about all sorts of stuff. I think it just depends on what your goals are. There's really no right or wrong way.
Thank you. Our next one: how do you decide between doing a panel or a presentation?
Um, so these days I don't have like, since I'm not really pitching out anymore and I'm getting more inbound requests, I assess elements that are a little above and out of just like, is it a presentation or a panel? I look at the conference, I look at the roster, and the diversity of the speaker roster. I look at, depending on the size, I look at compensation, depending on where it is, especially like if I have to travel, I look at compensation. So I would say like those are qualifying factors, whether it's a keynote or a Q&A or a panel. I also try to look at the organization and what they're trying to do, their mission, what they're trying to drive forward. You know, South by Southwest versus this, you know, have two very different, I'm getting very different things out of both of these very different speaking engagements, right? And so I think, again, it comes back to, you have to deeply understand what your goals are for public speaking. At this point, I am mostly, you know, I'm actually trying to do more with like diverser groups of people in larger places, while also finding avenues in a much more intimate setting to deliver like this type of information like we're discussing today. It depends. Sorry, that's probably a cop-out answer, but it really like being super clear on what your goals are, and they will change over time. And sometimes, and especially as you gain experience and you start speaking more and more, it's okay to just not be attached to any sort of outcome and just kind of like pitch and see what comes your way. And like, I have like at this point, like since I'm not actively pitching out anywhere, you know, I kind of see what comes to me, and if it feels right, I do it. If it doesn't feel right, I don't do it. I mean, and I think, again, my answer to that now is very different than it was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I will take anything, because my goal at that time was to learn how to be a better public speaker and to break into being a public speaker. So I could say, you know, in a couple of years, I have 10 speaking engagements under my belt, right? At that point, it was all a numbers game. I just needed to start speaking. Whereas now I deeply assess, you know, the different aspects of the conference or the organization, to see if it's a good fit for my values. And so very, very different needs and goals.
Awesome, thank you. We're running a little short on time, so I'm going to ask read off one more question. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get through all the questions, but if you have other questions, we'll definitely try to get answers to you through our follow-up email after the event. The last question I'm going to ask is, how do you balance a demanding career and creating great content online?
I have no idea. That's the honest answer. I will say, I think it's also a point of my career where I'm able to, you know, set and maintain and be fiercely protective of my boundaries. And each part of your career, you're going to have different goals, right? Like in my 20s, in my early 20s, it was like saying yes to everything because I had the energy to do so. I do not have that energy anymore. I am very selective about, you know, the time I spend on social media, what kind of opportunities I say yes to. And at the same time, also very protective of my work boundaries, and also grateful to have work on a team and in a company that has that, you know, mutual respect of boundaries, where, you know, my boss is not calling me and talking to me after hours. Nobody is. And, you know, when we're working, when we're working, and when I'm not. And so I mentioned earlier, as far as like social media content goes, I have no strategy. I think of sometimes it might be like, oh, I have a couple of ideas in the week. I jot them down, and then, you know, I create them kind of in the moment, because I don't ever want it to become robotic or putting content out there just for the sake of putting it out there. and not actually delivering value. When I do sit down to do it, I pour over every single word that I share because I want to make sure it's delivering value and impact to the person who's on the receiving end. Whether people read it or not, I at least know that I put my all into like making something compelling and hopefully educational. So I think that just comes with like, you know, the good old topic of boundary setting, and
Yeah.
which slowly becomes easier over time, and it depends on the type of phase you're in your career. But I also say no to much more things now than I did 10 years ago.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This is great. I've learned so much just hearing all your answers. This has been great. We have about 10 minutes left in the event, and we are going to do breakout rooms just so people can meet each other. And before I open up our breakout rooms, I did want to just ask one more question. What is the best advice you received about public speaking? And then what is the worst advice you received?
The best advice I have received is, I have distilled it down to this phrase, is that a lot of times people, you think that you need to reach a certain level of expertise or in a certain point in your career to be a public speaker, that you need to have like some sort of specific title and be a leader to be a public speaker, but you don't have to wait until you reach the top to be a leader. You can be a leader doing anything you're doing right now. It doesn't matter what your title is. Leadership and being a public speaker go hand in hand. It's one of the greatest benefits of public speaking. And so that is like the best advice I got. The worst, I haven't gotten any bad advice, but I see a lot of bad advice out there. And I just tend to ignore it. And I think it mostly comes from the fact that it is an it's overcomplicated unnecessarily. I think it's a very formulaic process. And if you want to do it and you follow these steps, you can do it. You don't need to be a Barack Obama level orator to be a great public speaker. Anyone can do it. You just have to be, passionate about helping other people solve problems, really. And I will say, like, the unnecessary complication of like, how to do it and how to get into it is, the bad advice I never really received. But social media, for better or for worse, sometimes proliferates that type of content. So
well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you just taking the time to have this conversation with us and share your wisdom and experience with the community. And thank you all for coming. I'm going to open it up to breakout rooms, and I'll be posting some questions. These are just suggested just for some conversation. It's just, this is just the time to get to know and say hello to some people that maybe you don't know. And this is obviously very much optional. I'm going to post those questions in the chat for you all.